Hello everybody, welcome to another lesson about English grammar. Today we're going to see a new topic. We're gonna step back to the most simple lesson. I'm gonna try to cover in a sequential way. Okay, so let's start. Gonna make a little bigger like this. Okay, so we're gonna start with the unit 2 that is basically a present simple. We're gonna see what is a I do, right? When to use do. Okay, so for example, let's see the first section. Okay, section A. Study this example situation. Okay, we see this picture. There is a man who lays down on the bed. Probably he's sleeping or probably he's died. We don't know exactly, right? But we can see a picture, right? In the picture, on the picture, is he with a bus, right? And that's it. So let's read. So Alex is a bus driver, but now he's in bed asleep. Okay. He didn't pass away, okay? He's just asleep, okay? He's not. He is not driving a bus. He's asleep, okay? But he drives a bus. He's a bus driver, okay? Okay. In this part, drives, works, does, right, and etc. is the present simple, right? An example of this could be I drive, or we drive, or you drive, or they drive, or maybe I work, we work, you work, they work, and etc. Okay. So let's try to understand this part. Okay, so when we can use a present simple, right? We use present simple to things to talk about things are true, right? For example, when we say Alex is a bus driver, right? But now he's in bed, right? The fact that he's sleeping doesn't change his profession, right? One other part is he's not driving a bus because he's sleeping. The fact that he's sleeping, right, doesn't change their profession. His profession, right? So when we want to use a present simple, right, we use the verb in its base form. In this case, drive, right? This is the base form of the verb. Okay, drive or work or do, right? But when we want to use for third person, for example, subject like he, she, and it, we have to add an s at the end of the base form of the base. Of the base form of the verb. Like for example, drives, okay, or for example, drives or works, or in this case, does. Okay, so remember, when I talk about to the first person, in this case, myself, I, right? Or when we're talking about to a second person, in this case, could be you, right? You. Or when we're talking about to plural, in this case, we or you. So that includes yourself and other group, right? Or we're talking about to they, right? Like a group of people, but a group of people who doesn't include yourself, right? We use a base form of the verb, right? But when we are talking about to third person, like a he or she or it, in this case, a thing, right? we use the base form of the verb plus an s or es. This part is gonna depend of the time of verb. Okay, we're gonna see in future lesson we have different type of verbs, like for example a regular verbs or not regular verbs or irregular verbs. Sorry. Okay, let's move on to the section B to understand better. Okay, for example, we use the present simple to talk about things in general. Remember, that's interesting, right? We use the present simple to talk about things in general. We use it to say that something happens all the time or repeatedly. Okay, or that something is true in general. For example, nurses look after patients in hospital, right? That's something that is true in general. We are not talking about to the all nurses, but we're talking about that something that is true in general. Most of the nurses look after patients in hospital. Maybe other nurses not. Maybe in a private houses or maybe in a specific place, but not all of them look after patients in hospital, right? Another one. I usually go away at weekends. I usually go away at weekends, right? In that case, we are talking about that something that happens all the time or repeatedly. In this case, I'm using the frequency adverb like usually, so we're talking about that something that happens all the time or repeatedly. I could say I usually go away at weekends, or I can also say I never go away at weekends, or I could say I always go away at weekends. So we are talking about something that happens all the time or repeatedly. Okay, the earth goes around the sun. The earth goes around the sun. Okay, so we are talking about something that is true. Okay, we can also use the simple present to talk about facts. Maybe this is not in the book, but that's something we can also use to talk about talking about facts. For example, the earth goes around the sun. Okay, we cannot deny that because we see how's the day works in the air, right? This is also used when we're talking about to experience. For example, if we put our hands right on the fire, right, we're gonna burn our hands, right? That's something we learn about. That's something what we didn't learn for ourselves, or maybe some people yes, but that's something that is true because our ancestors back in the past they had to learn about that, right, in order to survive, right? We're talking about a fat. The fat that you put your hands on the fire, you're gonna get burned, right? That's a fat. That's something that is true and we cannot deny, right? Another thing, the cafe opens at 7:30 in the morning, right? We are talking about that something happens all the time or repeatedly. Okay, now we say I work, but he works. So we are coming back again that we are using the base form of our verb with the first, second, and plural subjects. Okay, in this case we're talking about to the first person, I work, but when I say he works, we're talking about to third person. Okay, another example would be you go, right? We're talking about to the second person, but when I say it goes, right, we're talking about the third person. Or we can say they teach, right? They teach. We are talking about in plural, right? Maybe we are not talking about to to ourselves and other people. We're only talking about to a specific group of people, right? We're talking about plural. In this case, they teach. But when I say my sister, we're talking about to the third person, right? My sister teaches. In this example, we are adding, right, the es at the end of the verb. Another example, I have, okay, I have, right? But the third person, right, form is he has. He has. Okay? Let's move on to the section C. That is, we use do and does to make question and negative sentences. Okay? So in that case, we are not talking about do as a verb. We're talking about do as auxiliary. Okay? How's the structure? It's very simple. Okay? First of all, we have a double question, okay, and no double question. What does exactly mean this? Okay, let me find, I guess this one. Yeah, a simple question, when it's also known a yes or no question. That is basically a question that has a simple answer, like for example, I do. For example, if I say, do I work? Do I work? You're making a sentence, you're making a question, right? So the simple could be, yes, I do, right? And you see the answer is very simple. It's yes or no. Yes or not. But when we are talking about two information question, in this case a double question, we are talking about to get more information about the question. For example, where do you come from? Where do you come from, right? We are asking for information, right? In this case, a place, right? That's different a yes or no question. In a yes or no question, the answer is simple, yes or no, yes or no. But in an information question or double question, right? You're gonna see why it's called a double question, right? We are talking about more context. We're asking for more information. Could be a place, could be a date, right? Could be someone, well, I don't know. Okay? In this case, we're gonna just talk about to a yes or no question. Okay? So how to make a yes or no question, right? Very simple. We have to follow this structure that is called auxiliary plus a subject plus a verb. In this case, a verb, right? We can also add an object, but this is optional. Okay, I'm gonna keep like this, object. Perfect. Okay, and of course our character, right? That means we are doing a question. Okay, in this case a question mark or whatever. So, for example, we have to keep the same. Okay, we have to keep do for the first, second, and plural, and we have to keep does for third person. Okay, in this case, do I? We are talking about the first person. Do we? We are talking about plural. Do you? We can talk about a second person, or we can also use for a group of people. Do you, right? Today, right? So in this case, do I work? Do we work? Do you work? Do they work? Right? You see, auxiliary, subject plus verb. Okay, and it's exactly the same when we're talking about the third person. The only thing we change is the auxiliary. Instead of using do, we use does. In this case, does he drive? Does he do? Does he work? Or does she work? Does she drive? Does she do? And so on, right? We can play with all of these we can play with all of these verbs, or with all of these subjects, right? So when we're talking about to do negative sentences, right, we use the auxiliary don't. Okay, don't for first person, second person, and plural. Okay, but we use doesn't for third people, third person, right? For example, I could say I don't work, or we don't work, or you don't work, or they don't work, right? But for third person, we say he doesn't work, or she doesn't work, or it doesn't work. Okay. Let's see some examples. For example, I come from Canada. Where do you come from? I come from Canada. Where do you come from? Right? In this case, we are asking. That's called a double question, or also known as an information question, because we are asking for a place, in this case, where, right? But you see, it keeps the same structure that I just on a question. First of all, comes the information word, in this case, where, what, who, or whatever, right? And then come an auxiliary, you see, right? A subject, in this case, you, a verb is come, from, that is like we're gonna say that is an object, right? But it's part of the verb, right? Another example that a negative sentence is I don't go away very often. I don't go away very often. That is mean I don't move to away very often, right? I tend to stay in the same place. In this case, because I'm using a first person, that is I, right? I have to use don't, right? Another example, what does this word mean? What does this word mean, right? Not what means this word, right? Remember, when we're talking about to a question, we have to follow this structure. I'm gonna add a new, I'm gonna change this color, and I'm gonna color red. We're gonna write a double question like this. Okay, I'm gonna just put what, okay, a double. Oh, that was it. Yep. Double question. Okay, so this double question includes what, where, could be who, right? What, where. I think that's it, I guess. I don't remember. Oh no. Anyway, so let's move on to the next part. Rice doesn't grow in cold climates. Rice doesn't grow in cold climates, right? So in that example, we're talking about two third person. We're talking about two things. In this case, rice. Rice doesn't grow in cold climates, right? Let's move on next. Following examples. In the following examples, do is also the main verb. For example, do you do, or doesn't do, right? So remember, we can use do as a verb, but also as auxiliary, okay? And this sentence is a clear example about that. For example, when we say, what do you do, right? In this part, the first do is an auxiliary, because remember, in order to make a question, we need an auxiliary, okay? And the second do is a verb, in this case, do, right? make something. And the answer, I work in a shop, right? That's a very simple answer, right? The next example is, he's always so lazy. He doesn't do anything to help. Okay, in this example, doesn't, right, is an auxiliary, right? And do is the main verb. In this case, he doesn't do anything to help, right? Let's move on to the section D. We use the present simple to say how often we do things. Okay, for example, I get up at 8 o'clock every morning, right? That's something that I do often. It's something that I often do. Okay, in this case, get up at 8 o'clock every morning. How often do you go to the dentist? How often do you go to the dentist, right? We're talking about we're asking about frequency. In this case, how often, right? I could say, right? I usually go to the dentist every month, right? Or every, I don't know, 6 months. And another one, Julie doesn't drink tea very often. Julie doesn't drink tea very often, right? We are talking about, right, and a negative sentence. In this case, Julie doesn't drink tea very often. Okay, we can also mix. Okay, in this case, we're mixing like a negative sentence with also a frequency that is very often. Okay, another one, Robert usually goes away 2 or 3 times a year, right? Here we see we're talking about a frequency. In this case, Robert usually goes away 2 or 3 times a week, right? And because we're talking about the third person, in this case, Robert, we are using goes and not go. Okay, let's move on to another section, that is section E, right? That is, I promise and apologize. Okay, in this section we are seeing there is some exceptions. Okay, it's not like exception, it's more like how we say things. For example, we cannot say I'm promising, or I'm apologizing, or maybe I'm advising, or I'm insisting. No, it doesn't work like this, right? In that case, there is word that we have to use it always in the simple present, or present simple. Okay, for example, I promise, or I apologize, because the simple thing, right, that we are saying I apologize, right, we are doing that action. Okay, for example, sometimes we do things by saying something, right? For example, when you promise to do something, right, you can say I promise. Yeah, we are doing things by saying something. I promise, right? I promise I won't be late. I promise I won't be late. No, I'm promising, right? I don't know you're gonna you're gonna complete, right, your promise, but I promise I won't be late. That's what she said. Another example is, what do you suggest I do? What do you suggest I do? Right? I suggest that you, right? Because the simple fact that they were saying we are doing something. Okay? In the same way, we can say I apologize, I advise, I insist, I agree, I refuse, right? We're gonna see some examples in the next page, okay? Let's see the exercise. That's the most interesting part. So we're gonna do the exercise together. So if I make any mistake, don't worry. I wanna fix it in the PDF version that I'm gonna upload to this in this video. Okay, it's gonna be below on the comments. Okay, let's start. Complete the sentences using the following verbs. For example, Tanya speaks German very well. We're using speaks because we're talking about third person. We're talking about Tanya. Okay, let's move on to the next example. Ben and Jack to the same school. Okay, let's try to guess. I'm gonna change the color. I'm gonna put like blue one. Okay, yeah. Ben and Jack to the same school. We can use go. Okay, you're gonna write go. Why? Because we're talking about to a plural. We're talking about two people, Ben and Jack. And because we're talking about the plural, we have to use the verb in there in its base form. In this case, just go. Okay. Let's move on to the next example. Bad driving, many accidents. Bad driving, many accidents. So let's analyze the subject. In that case, bad driving. Bad driving is not a person, it's a thing. Okay, it's a noun. So we are talking about a singular, right? But we also talking about to a third person. In this case, a things. And because it's a things, it has to be a verb that also includes the es or s. In this case, cause. In this case, cause. Bad driving cause many accidents, right? Remember, if you're gonna drive, don't drink. So next example. The museum at 4 o'clock on Sundays. We're gonna choose close, okay? But let's analyze the subject. In this case, the museum. We are talking about not about person. We're not talking about people. We're talking about things. In this case, the museum, right? So the museum, right? Close with S, right? At 4 o'clock on Sundays. Okay? Let's move on to the next sentence. My parents in a very small flat, right? So we are talking about plural. So we have to use a base form verb. In this case, we're gonna use live. My parents live in a very small flat. Okay. Next example. The Olympic Games. Okay. Plays every 4 years. Now, the Olympic Games. It looks like plural, right? But no, this is singular. Okay. If you see, we are using the, right? The Olympic Games. The simple fact that we are using the, right? We are talking about one thing. Okay. We're gonna see in future lesson, but when we use the, we're talking about that there is only one thing. For example, when we say the moon, or when we say the sun, right? We use the because we are talking about that there is only one of them. For example, we cannot say suns in plural, right? Because we know there is only one sun. In this case, the sun or the moon, right? Because there is only one moon. There is only one sun, right? In this case, the Olympic Games, we're talking about a singular. We are talking about an specific Olympic Games, right? So this one is a singular, right? And also this one is a third person, because we are not talking about people, we're talking about things. In this case, the Olympic Games. Okay, so because of that, we're gonna use take, but with s, because we're talking about to the third person. Okay, let's move on. The Panama Canal, the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. Okay, in that case, the Panama Canal, we're talking about to singular, and also we're talking about things, right? In that case is connects. Okay, the Panama Canal connects the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. Okay, let's move on to the next section. 2.2, put the verb into the correct place. Okay, the first example is Julia doesn't drink tea very often. Julia doesn't drink tea very often, right? We have to see this part. This parenthesis, right? This parenthesis tell us more information about the sentence or the question, right? In this case, it's a negative. Okay, it's a negative question. This is the base for of the verb, and this is the negative. So let's analyze the next one. What time? What time? Right? And the banks, right, is the subject, and close is the verb. Here's the complement, right? So remember, what is the structure, right? We have the double question plus an auxiliary plus subject plus the verb plus the complement. Okay, or in this case the object. Okay, that's our structure. We got what time, so we already complete this part, the double question, right? And the next thing is our auxiliary. Okay, let's see. The banks, right? This is plural, right? So do. What time do the subjects, in this case the banks? Okay, what time do the banks close here? Okay, what time do the banks close here? Okay, we are talking about plural because we are talking about banks, right, with s, right? So because it's plural, we have to use do, right? The verbs in its base form. Okay, the next one. I have a car, but I, right? And we see where our verb is used, right? And it's a negative sentence, right? So, because it's a negative sentence, we have to use a negative auxiliary. But first of all, let's identify what's our subject. In this case, is I, right? So, because it's I, we are talking about the first person, right? You're gonna use do not or don't. Okay, we can use do not because this is the large form, or we can use also don't. This is the contraction. Okay, this is the short way to use, and this is the long way. This is more formal, but it's the same. Okay, in this case, I do not or I don't. So then our verb, so use. So I have a car, but I don't use it too much. Oh, sorry, I have a car, but I don't use it much. Okay, let's move on to the next. Where, right? Our subject is Maria, And our main verb is come, and the complement is the object is from. Is she Spain? Is she Spanish? Sorry, is she Spanish? So because we are talking about the third person, we're gonna use a third person auxiliary. In this case, is does, right? Where does our subject, in this case, is Maria, and the main verb, in this case, come from, right? Where does Maria come from? Is she Spanish? Okay, very simple, right? Let's move on to the next one. What? What? Our double question is what? By the way, I forgot one of those double question. What, where, who, place, time. Ah, when. So the next the other question was when. Jesus Christ. When, yeah. Okay. So let's go back. Now, here. What, right? First of all, our double question or our information question is what, right? Our subject is a second person, that is case you, and our main verb is do, right? In that case is what do you do, right? What do you do, right? What do you do? I am an electrician, right? Let's move on to the next one. Look at this sentence. What, right, is a double question, right? Our subject is this word, right? And our main verb is me, right? What? Because it's a thing, in this case a third person, in this case a thing, we have to use the auxiliary does. What does this word mean, right? What does this word mean? I'm gonna close this part. Okay. And the next sentence. By the way, what does it mean, right? This is a very common question when you do not the meaning of a word. Like for example, if I don't know what does mean pencil, or you can ask, what does pencil mean, right? That's a good question for English beginners. The next part. David isn't very fit. Okay? David isn't very fit. Okay. He, right? He is the third person. Okay? It's a singular. Okay? He. We got a negative. Okay? A negative sentence because we were saying not. And we also, our main verb is do, right? And the object is any sport. Okay? So, in this case, our sorry, I got distracted. So in this case, the auxiliary is doesn't, right? Because we're talking about the third person. In this case, he. Okay, he doesn't do any sport. Okay, he doesn't do any sport, and that's why David isn't very fit. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Eat. Okay, take me an hour to get to work in the morning. Okay, so this is two sentences, but we wanna try to solve the first one. Okay. Okay, let's analyze the subject. The subject is a third person. In this case, it's not a person; it's a thing. Okay, it. Okay, and because it's it, because it's a thing, we have to use takes, right? The main verb is take, and we add is at the end of the verb because we are talking about things. Okay, it takes me an hour to get to work in the morning. How long, right? It takes you, right? In this case, our main subject is it. Okay, we're talking about thing. Okay, we're talking about time. Our main verb is take. So, how long does it take you, right? So, the full answer is, it takes me 1 hour to get to work in the morning. How long does it take you, right? Okay, let's move on to the next section. Oh my God, I didn't notice that this video is gonna be a long one, a big one, a large one, blah blah blah. So, complete the sentences using this verb. Sometimes you need the negative. Okay. For example, the sun, right? The sun. Okay, let's read the first one. Okay. The earth goes around the sun. Okay. Okay. Right. Rice doesn't grow in a cold climate. In cold climates. Okay. There's one. The sun, right? The sun rise. Why rise? Because we're talking about to the third person, right? The sun rise in the east, right? In the east. Okay. The next one. Peace. Peace. Okay. We're talking about plural. Peace, right? Think so. Bees. In this case, bees makes. Bees make honey. Yeah. Bees make honey. Yeah. The next one. Vegetarians. Vegetarians. We're talking about two plural, right? Vegetarians. Okay, sometimes we need negative. Oh, okay, makes sense. Vegetarians do not or doesn't as well, or don't eat of them. I'm gonna write both. Okay. Vegetarians do not or don't eat meat. Okay. I almost uh, I almost forgot about the negative sentence. I say, what, vegetarian? Vegetarian eat meat? What? But anyway. Um, an atheist, okay. In this case, does not. Oh, I'm gonna try to write the beginning here. Does not or doesn't is the same, right? In this case, our verb is gonna be believe. Okay, believe. Okay. An atheist doesn't or does not believe in God. I'm gonna delete one of them. Okay. Nice. Next one. An interpreter. Okay, we're talking about a third person, someone, right? From one language to another, right? In that case, our answer is gonna be translate, right? An interpreter translates from one language to another. Okay. The next one, liars. Liars are people who the truth. Okay, in this case, we're talking about a plural. We're talking about liars, right? Liars are people who wanna say tell, who do not tells the truth. Yeah. Okay. This is a plural because if you see in the sentence it's a liars are, right? We're talking about plural. That was a simple one, easy peasy. The river Amazon, we're talking about things. We're talking about a river, right? And you see we're talking about only one. There is only one river Amazon, right? There is not two of them. So the river Amazon into the Atlantic Ocean, right? In this case, it flows, okay? The river Amazon flows, it means like go through, right, into the Amazon, the Atlantic Ocean, okay? Uh, you ask Lisa a question about herself and her family, right? The question. This one is a good one. Now, you know that Lisa plays tennis. You want to know how often she plays. So ask her, okay? In this case, how often do you play tennis, right? That's a way we can ask, right? We're talking about frequency. In this case, how often do you play tennis? We're making a question to Lisa. You know that Lisa plays tennis. We know, right? So you want to know how often, right? Let's see the next example. Perhaps Lisa's sisters plays tennis too. You want to know, ask Lisa. Okay, so let's ask Lisa, okay? We can ask, hey Lisa, right? Oh, sorry. Hey Lisa. Oh, Jesus, Lisa. Okay. Hey Lisa, how often? How often does? Okay, Jesus Christ, can I move it? Yeah. Hey Lisa, how often does your sister play tennis? Right? That's the question. Oh, double N. Okay? That's a way to ask how often does your sister play tennis. Yeah, does your sister play tennis, right? If we say your sister, right? We're not talking about to Lisa, we're talking about to the sister, to the Lisa sister, okay? That's why we use does, because we're talking about to third person. So next question. You know that Lisa goes to the cinema a lot, okay? You want to know how often, right? So we have to ask Lisa, okay? So we're going to ask Lisa, right? So how often do you, right? How often do you go to the cinema? Okay? What's the difference between the second and third question, right? In the third question, we are asking directly to Lisa, okay? Like, how often do you go to the cinema, right? But in the second question, we are asking about Lisa's sister, okay? Next question. You know that Lisa's brothers works. You want to know what he does. So ask Lisa, okay? How can we ask that, okay? How often, right, does your brother, okay? How often does your brother, wait. Sorry. What does your brother do? Yeah, that's the way. What does your brother do? Right? Because we want to know what Lisa's brothers do. Okay, so that's why we ask, what does your brother do? Okay. The next question. You are not sure whether Lisa speaks Spanish, so you want to know, ask her. Okay, what would be the way, right? So, do you speak Spanish? Yeah, this one is very simple one. It's not like the other ones. This one is just a yes or no question because we are not sure, right? If Lisa speaks Spanish, so we want to know about that. So the question is very simply, do you speak Spanish? Yes or not? Okay. The next one, you don't know where Lisa's grandparents live. Okay, so you want to know, ask Lisa, right? So in that case, we're interested to know a place. In this case, where Lisa's grandparents lives. So in this case, we're gonna use when. No, sorry, where, because we're interested to know a place. Okay, where do, we're gonna use do because we're talking about plural. In this case, Lisa's grandparents, right? Where Lisa's grandparents live. Okay, yep, that's it. Okay, let's move on to the last section, that is 2.5. Complete using the following verbs. So the following phrase. In this case, I agree, I apologize, I apologize if I'm making a mistake, I insist, okay, I insist, okay, I insist that you have to check by yourself as well, right, just in case. I promise, I promise, I promise to make a better video for the next time. I recommend I'll make a recheck, okay? I suggest. Okay, anyway, forget about it. So, I won't tell anybody what you say. I promise. I promise, no? Not I promising, okay? We don't have ing in this kind of verb. It's just a simple one, a present simple. I promise, okay? In restaurant, you must let me pay for this meal, right? I insist, okay? I insist. I insist, okay? The next one, for what I say, for what I said, I shouldn't have said it. So in this case, it's I apologize, okay? I apologize for what I said. I shouldn't have said it. This case is I apologize. I apologize for what I said. Okay? The next one. The new restaurant in Baker Street is very good. Okay? So in this case, I recommend it. I recommend it. Okay, I recommend it. And finally, the last one, I think you're absolutely right. I agree. I agree with you. Okay? Okay, that's everything for this video. I hope to see you for the next time. I hope you find useful these videos. Okay? And I'm going to try to upload more videos. Okay? Thank you for watching this video, and I hope you have a good week. Bye.